Welcome to the OVW Podcast, the unofficial podcast of Ohio Valley Wrestling. My name is Jack Minoaks.
I'm Brian Hines.
We are sitting down today with Rocko Jerome, several-time guest, second time, but we're going to make it several times.
Several times. It feels like several times.
I'm glad that you feel comfortable here.
I do. And my appearance today was sponsored by chocolate milk.
Just
I love
chocolate milk.
Mm-hmm.
Rocko, this I guess I want to say this
I
is
love it.
we are woefully illiterate in the history of Ohio Valley Wrestling. Brian Hines and I
Really?
are. Yes.
Yes.
My first show was in 2018
Okay.
or 2017, around there. So I'm very new to Ohio Valley Wrestling in terms of its history. I always say that Ohio Valley Wrestling has some of the best fans, if not the best fans, and it's because you guys are so passionate. A lot of you have been around a long time, and we wanted to sit down with fans and other personalities that have been around a long time so that we can kind of brush up on our OVW history.
Yeah, you're fortunate enough to go back that far. My first experience with OVW was the Country Boy Brewing show that is in episode 2 of Wrestlers,
Oh, wow.
which was like 2022.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience. So I have even less than you.
And honestly, I couldn't think of a better guest to kick off this kind of OVW retrospective than you. Last episode that you were on was one of my favorite episodes that we've sat down and recorded. I had a lot of fun with you.
Thanks. That was fun.
So,
It was a good time.
honestly,
With the comic books, ghostagents.net.
yeah, I'm Rocko Jerome, ghostagent.net. So honestly, Rocko, let's just kind of start at your beginning with
Sure.
Ohio Valley Wrestling.
Yeah. Well, so like what I have today in a way is kind of a cautionary tale about if you've been thinking about going to OVW or you have the opportunity to go to OVW and you're not going, you should be going.
You should go.
You should go. And I'm going to tell you why today. I called this meeting with you guys. I didn't tell you much about what I have to talk about.
Yeah, I have no idea.
No idea. So this is all right. So first, I want to preface this by saying, like, I'm just a guy. I'm just some nerd like everybody else who's weird and loves wrestling and stuff. But what I want to talk about today is the fact that years ago I had the opportunity to do something that probably would have been pretty cool, and I blew it for no reason. Like when I look, it's funny because you look back at your 20s or whatever, and it's just like why didn't I go to that?
Yeah.
Why wasn't I doing that? And like, anyhow, so 2001, 2002, in that neighborhood, obviously back in the day, it was before YouTube.
Right.
Or really any kind of internet video. What we now kind of think of as like the early days of the internet when it was still kind of like the Wild West in a lot of ways.
And somehow much nicer. It was like more unruly, but much nicer for some reason.
Well, you kind of had to be kind of smart to get on the internet in the first place.
Yeah.
Like there was a certain barrier of entry. And I was never like a computer whiz, but whatever. It's funny because, it took me forever to get one of these. Like it was like, it's only been like 10 years ago that I even had a cell phone of any kind because I just didn't like what they seemed to be doing to culture.
Sure.
Yeah, I can
And I had
see
a
that.
job where I worked at a store, and it was like, if you want to talk to me, come see me. And I was very old school like that way, But anyhow, in those days, I was getting into wrestling in a bigger and deeper way than I ever had before, circa around like 1999. It was because I thought The Rock was really cool.
Well, I mean, nobody's cooler than The Rock in 1999.
I know, dude.
Yeah.
I know. Now it's kind of touch and go. He had me so good with the final boss, and then lately I don't know, but whatever. But it got me like my thing with wrestling. I'd watched like Memphis Wrestling and the WWF Superstars show on Saturday mornings. We didn't have cable, so like Jerry Lawler and stuff like that. But I was always kind of like, this is dumb. There was always a part of me that was like, didn't really get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was kind of like, this is fake and dumb. And then when UFC came out, it's like, I was like, that's fake. I don't care about any of that.
Right.
So then when The Rock came out, or what I sort of like became cognizant of that, I was like all in on wrestling, and learned about, works and shoots and faces and heels and blading and juicing and
Well,
all are.
with you, my kind of journey into being a wrestling fan is like I wasn't allowed to watch it growing up. I didn't really start watching it until I was an adult, and I knew that it was fake and dumb, and that was my perception of it. And then when you see the meta of it, and you see what a beautiful world exists,
Right.
like you're glad that it's fake and dumb,
Yeah.
because
Right.
you otherwise it would just be like UFC, which is like has its own merit,
Yeah.
but it's the world behind wrestling is so much more fascinating than what happens on the screen for a fan. I
Often
think, for a
so.
certain type of fan.
Often so, yeah. And also, I mean, UFC is a work in a lot of ways. And a
Yeah.
lot of the fans don't see it. Because people that think they're too smart for wrestling are usually the people who will fall for wrestling angles
In
as
UFC.
soon as they are not in wrestling anymore.
Yeah, and
Like, you can't convince me that Donald Trump didn't learn a lot. I don't want to get too far into that.
No,
for
no,
the
no.
love of God. But he learned a lot about what he does through wrestling.
absolutely.
And that's the same case with everything. Like you take how many people for years believed that Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman really hated each other?
Oh God,
You're the
years
expert
and
on
years.
that.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey thought that Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman hated each other. When they
he
were
was filming
making
the
that
movie.
movie,
Yeah.
Jerry Lawler shows up and Jim Carrey's all like messing with him, like trying to get in his head, and it's like Lawler's like, "Listen, buddy, I knew Andy. There's not
That guy
many
was
people who knew him."
That guy was my friend.
Yeah,
in
like, do
that
you-
documentary, that's one of the most
Right.
powerful statements I've
Yeah.
ever heard.
Yeah, and it's like Jim Carrey's like so far in his method acting thing, and it's like this guy could have told you some things, and
Right.
you didn't want to listen because you assumed he was a meathead wrestler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When in truth, Jerry Lawler is the people's champ in the way that The Rock can never be, man. I mean, you go to Memphis in those days, like he was the. I mean,
Yeah.
there's Elvis and there's Jerry Lawler, right? Like.
Yeah, this is a guy where like 98% of the televisions when he was on in Memphis are tuned to him.
Yeah.
Like an unbelievable captive audience.
The documentary Memphis Heat, everybody should see that. That's in wrestling. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. There used to be the two main sort of dirt sheets and sources for like inside wrestling stuff, right? One was the Wrestling Observer,
Right,
which
Dave
is, of
Meltzer.
course, Uncle Dave. And then the other one that to me, they seemed like they were like Coke and Pepsi, like they were kind of like neck and neck, was the Wrestling Observer, which was a guy named Wade Keller
Wade Keller, yeah.
was the main dude there. And I didn't really look at Wrestling Observer, right? Which makes it kind of like I'm like the guy who bet on Beta in a way. Because I was more paying attention to the Wrestling Observer. And they put a call out for people who lived somewhere where they could see OVW programming. And the main reason for that was this was during the days when OVW was the farm club. It was basically what NXT is today, only it was only on locally. Jim Cornette ran it. These were the days of John Cena.
Batista.
Blank on Batista, who we're going to get to. I was going to try to say Batista last because he's the key to the story.
Lesnar.
Lesnar, Orton, Rhodes.
CM Punk's in there
That's
around that time.
later. Rhodes and CM Punk were later. There were all these guys that they clearly had put a lot of money into, and they put them up like they lived behind the Barnes and Noble on Hurstbourne in an apartment complex, right?
Right.
That's where all those dudes lived. And Shelton Benjamin was around at that time. Like all these like these people that they were really trying to do something with,
Sure.
you know. And they wanted it was Brock Lesnar was sort of like the reason the people were interested. People like Wade Keller were particularly interested because there had been a picture and a story about Brock Lesnar in an issue of that. Remember when they had that Raw magazine that used to come out that you could buy like Kroger or whatever? So there was a story about Brock Lesnar and then a picture of him, like the young, like, you know,
Yeah, 22 years old.
It's hard to imagine now, but like, because you see him a lot, but imagine what it was like the first time you saw that guy. Because it was just like, what is that, dude?
Yeah.
That looks like a shaved gorilla. Like, is that a human being? Like, what is, it's like, he's like Pixar. you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like, look at this thing. So that kind of kicked off.
And a pedigree to back it up, like a legit shoot pedigree to back it up.
So him above all others, I think, was the thing where it was like, we need someone with eyes on him, right? I'm 22, 23 years old at this point, and I had worked previously at the Barnes & Noble, I just mentioned. I worked in the music department, and it was really cool. I liked it. And
what was the highest selling CD at the Barnes and Noble when you were working there?
When I was working there,
yeah, are we looking at Human Clay? What's out in 2003?
Because of when I got to get into the swing of things, they would let me merchandise the store.
Okay.
And I got to sell the stuff that I felt like was good because I believed in it.
Sure.
Sam Cooke, Live at Harlem Square, was probably my all-time highest selling CD because I loved it. Still love it today. So other stores, it might be some Celine Dion or some shit like that. In my store, it was good stuff because I had the ability to do that. So I had that job. I didn't take it seriously when I was like in my teens. And the woman who ran it at the time, I got into it with her and I quit. Like I damn near walked out. Like it was real bad. And I had an office job.
Or real good.
I mean, it put some problems in front of me.
Sure.
It created some obstacles for me later, right?
Sure.
I had an office job. I had a job that like a middle-aged man would have. I was the manager of complaints at a call center. I lost that job right before 9/11. 9/11 happened. I said, I never want to do a job like that. I don't want to do ever again. The only thing I've done so far that I liked was Barnes & Noble, the music department. I want to try to get back there, right? So like that woman got fired, and then a friend of mine got put in charge of the department. Okay.
So you got the end.
Yeah, but still, like the guy who was
they
the
got
manager,
put in charge of the department. I'm
right?
sorry. Yeah,
but the store manager was still like, "What? That guy walked out." So put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. So about the same time, and I'm working at Holly Cook, if you remember that place. And Holly Cook, it was funny because it was an independent bookstore, but they never let me do anything there. It was always like, do this, do that. I wasn't given any
that's not very independent.
Well, I mean, it was independent for the right people, but like for me, it wasn't.
Depending on whose side.
I don't want to. I mean, I was a different person then too, man. If anybody that sees this probably won't, but not a lot of wrestling fans at Holly Cook, I don't think. But anybody who sees this now, actually, there was one. There was a guy that became like my main wrestling buddy who happened to work there. Anyway, I keep going on these tangents, man. I gotta stop.
That's all right. That's all right.
Anyway, so they put out the call for anybody who can watch the show and review it and give the skinny on who these guys are, what they're capable of, what it looks like they might be able to do or not do, hit us up. And I did. And I guess there probably weren't that many other people besides me who did so because I got the gig.
What was your relationship with writing at the time?
Funny thing about that. So I would write all the time, but I always thought of it as just like a thing that I did. And I had no aspirations of ever trying to use that to make money. Like I'm sure I had, if you talk to me then, I'm sure I had like some sort of cockamamie ideas about the purity of it or something of like, well, no, I can't try to sell this. This is, whatever. But I would poo-poo it, and then but I would also be pretty precious about it too. So,
yeah, I know that paradox very well, sir.
Wasted my time, I mean, there was all this time that I could have been like trying, but I didn't, and that's basically what this story is about. Davis Arena. I live 15 minutes away now in the condo that I live in. At that time, I lived in an apartment that was 16 minutes away. I never went to OVW. I never went. Could have gone, just didn't go. I would watch the show, and it was pre-recorded, and they would show it on WBKI, and I just didn't go. I just never went. And I would watch the show. I would tape it when I wasn't home. It was like, I think it was on like Friday nights too, so most of the time I'd tape it and watch it.
Yeah.
And there was another dude whose name escapes me who would go and watch the show in person, and then he would do a review, and then I would do a review. So they did both, and they ran it on their website. which was a mess. The website was just like a string of links and like pop-up ads, for
That's how the internet was back then.
yeah. Now it would be dick pills. Back then I think it was like orthopedic shoes because they didn't have targeted advertising yet.
Yeah.
So like you would
They
just,
didn't
like,
figure out that what your age range
Yeah.
was, and social
the
demographic.
latest hot water bottle, whatever. So I would review the show, and the other guy would always be like, and then he got him in a full Nelson, and then he reversed it, and he got him in a chicken wing clutch. And it's like he would just say what the moves were, and I would be more like, all right, this guy, when he gets on the microphone, it sounds like a car that's been left out in the snow for too long, and I can't tell what he's talking about. But when he gets in the ring, the sweet science is apparent. Like I would use all this sort of flow.
You would try to write,
yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right, yeah.
unlike
And
this other guy.
yeah, and I would try to like get across the information that people wanted, which was, are these guys good?
Mhm.
Where are they deficient from my point of view? And that was like manna from heaven for wrestling geeks back then, because it was like these guys could be the next guys, and I'm there doing the review of the show, right? And it's like you can't see the video, like you'd have to get a VHS tape from somebody,
Right.
which I had, right? Also,
Sure.
valuable thing that I didn't bother to like see if I could like join a tape network or whatever. I just kind of like thought of it as being like, now I say that I go through every door that opens as far as opportunities in life.
Ghostagents.net.
Thank you. But back then I would just kind of lean against walls, and every so often one would be a door and I would just fall into it and then usually just kind of scramble back the other way through it again. So I'm reviewing the show and I'm like, this guy sucks, or like this guy's awesome. Or like I wouldn't say this guy sucks, but I would be like, promos aren't there for this guy yet. I can see potential, whatever.
Is there a guy that like you maybe weren't so high on that did like make it to the next level and
No.
really impress you?
That's not, no. Everybody that I thought wasn't very good. And this was a funny thing later to jump ahead, because I got to where the thing that is funny about Jim Cornette is that now he's like, he doesn't leave the house apparently. And it's like,
Oh,
if he does an appearance, there's a line out the door and he probably can charge for his autograph. Before the podcast took off, he would be at Comic-Con and no one but me would talk to him.
right.
Right? And I would like buy his comic
And
books.
he's just like, have you heard the Wendy story? And you're like, yeah.
He wouldn't be like that. That was before the Wendy story was even like a public thing.
Okay.
Like that's how far away from like the public eye he was.
Sure.
And he was always fun to talk to. And like after maybe like the third time, I don't know if you'd even remember me, but like the third time that I saw him and talked to him, I was like, I used to review the show. And by then he had like said enough like negative things about the guys that I didn't think were good that I was like, you and I were simpatico on everything. Like everything you were saying is pretty much like what I thought of the show at the time. There was
Sure.
nothing where it was like we were at odds. And it's funny because like telling him that like that you wrote for the dirt sheets, it's like you may as well tell him that like you love the smell of cottage cheese or something. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's like those guys don't have an opinion. Like what we're doing right here is like,
Yeah, well, and like especially like that handful of guys, Cornette, Pritchard, like that era of WWE creative, those kind of old school through the territories guys hate the dirt sheets.
yeah, right.
And
I mean, I can appreciate that.
yeah, I can, I completely can, especially for so long it seemed as if there was so little intent on real journalism in some of the dirt
Well, I
sheets.
think that's still the case.
Yeah,
honest,
I think-
really. I mean, is this journalism?
No, well, this is a podcast.
Sure,
but-
we're having fun. But I'm that's something that is I'm like that in my writing life anyway. I write advertorials for different small businesses and stuff. Like I sold all the way out a long time ago. I'm not a journalist. Like real journalism, I have a lot of appreciation
Right.
for, but like
yeah, but
that ain't what I'm doing.
the Sean Ross Sapps of the world like didn't exist in in
Not really, no.
the early 2000s.
Well, the closest you got was like Wade and Uncle Dave. Brian Alvarez was probably like 11 years old at this time, if not younger. Funny to contemplate. But anyway, I would review the show and talk about what I thought I was seeing. And on one of the things that Wade Keller said right off the bat was, don't try to get yourself over. Like, you're here to report this thing. Don't try to make it all about yourself, which was words that I needed badly at that point in my life anyway, because I frequently would tend to, make it the Rocko show. So I was like, all right, just the facts, man. That's what we'll do. And towards that notion, I put my email address on like every fourth one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't ever want to seem like I'm like trying to take advantage of the opportunity. Not smart. Not smart. So
were people like hitting you up? Were people emailing you back?
That's where we're going with this, Daddy-O.
Okay.
You just sit tight. You buckle up. Everything I gave you was the preamble for what I'm about to tell you now.
I'm ready.
So I get an email one day from, I don't remember exactly what it was, but you have to imagine that the name, the name Batista didn't roll off the tongue in those days, right? But I get an email from, I think, D. Batista at Earthlink or AOL.
Classic.
Right. And he was like, hey, Rocko, just introducing myself. My name is Dave Batista. You may know me as Leviathan. Because the bit was that he came out of the Ohio River and he was a monster.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. That is like one of the kind of more legendary clips from that era.
Yeah.
Is him in that dirty ass river.
Right. Yeah, with Sin, the wife of Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette, of course, who always says that the wrestling should be believable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love Jim Cornette. I do. But I don't have to agree with everything he says.
But he has a monster coming out of the Ohio River,
and it's
for
like,
what it's worth.
It's supposed to be believable, God damn it. And it's like, you had a monster on your show. On the CW affiliate, he came out of the Ohio River like.
This is also, I love Cornette too, but like
your math ain't mathin'.
You're over if you come out of a box is one of the most like baffling Cornettisms ever.
Yeah. Funny thing about Cornette, this might be controversial for anybody that's paying attention, but you can like Cornette and not have to like make him your whole viewpoint of everything. Like, I know a lot of people who like don't even really watch wrestling.
Yeah.
They're like, man, AEW stinks. And it's like, you don't know anything. You haven't watched it. You haven't watched anything. You're just listening to this guy and you're letting him tell you what you think. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I am always highly entertained by Cornette. 95% of the stuff I don't agree with.
Wow.
Just flat out.
Yeah.
And it's because, well, I know he's working, but his fan base, I don't think
a lot of them know.
I don't think they know.
I don't think a lot of them understand
that he's still doing a job. He's still making money. He's still he's still
I do
in
think
the
he
biz.
legitimately doesn't like AEW, but it's like the way that he's all in on it is not all in, so to speak, on his hatred of it. That's kind of one thing.
I think it's some minor annoyances that he probably turns into these, huge evangelical, attacks on AEW.
Well, and he's making
he's making that money.
Yeah,
so.
I miss just being able to just talk to him sometimes, man. It's too bad because that'll probably never happen again because now he's the head of a cult, Anyway, Dave Batista sends me an email, right? And I read this thing, and he's like, listen, I want to see if I can maybe get some advice from you. Right?
So he's asking you for advice?
For advice.
Okay.
Laughable, right? Because I'm truly just a guy who watches a lot of wrestling and has this kind of lucky gig.
And has, cable access to WBKI.
Yeah. Not even cable. It was on
just broadcast.
TV,
Yeah, at that point. Yeah, you just need the antenna.
Yeah.
So you were 23 at the time.
Around there, yeah.
So that would make him how old?
Well, he was an older guy when he got into the business.
he was
By
older,
like in his 30s.
Yeah, he was. That's always was the story about him, was that he
Right.
was kind of 10 years older than the rest of that.
There you
class.
go.
Okay, I
But
wasn't entirely sure.
he was actually younger than Ricco Constantino. Do you guys remember Ricco Constantino?
No, you'll have to remind me.
Ricco Constantino was, I think at the time, like 40-something years old.
Jeez.
He had been a winning contestant on American Gladiators. That was like his claim to fame.
Okay.
And he was one of the guys who was in OVW. And he got called up before anyone else. And he was in the Billy and Chuck angle. Remember the Billy and Chuck angle?
Yeah.
He was the one that when it came time to do the wedding, it turned out that Billy and Chuck were just working and they weren't gay, but Ricco was still supposed to be gay.
Right.
And like gay in wrestling
Now I remember.
doesn't mean that he looks like, Scott Hall or just Shawn Michaels, who
Yeah.
both look pretty gay.
Yeah, ultimately. Well, like,
In a way, gayer than like whatever Goldust and Ricco Constantino were supposed to be. Like it's like a cartoon version of what someone might think a gay
Shawn
person
Michaels
is.
was in Playgirl.
Right.
Like that's that's an established fact.
Yeah. Nobody gave him the memo. Wrestling's homoerotic in a lot of ways. Anyway, that's not why I'm here.
It is. Well, I think it's fine to accept that. Like, there's something very inherently homoerotic.
We could do
about
that.
wrestling.
We could do that episode another time. I don't want to get too far down that road, but it's accurate. I'm the guy who, at the very least, made the term "Leather Daddy Doug" stick.
Leather Daddy Doug. Yeah, you
Coined
did.
it with Mason and Miranda. I think they said Leather Daddy, and then I said Leather Daddy Doug, and then I made a sign, and now that's the show.
And now
it's canon.
That's how he gets brought to the ring.
Yeah, it made it into the continuity. Anyhow, Ricco Constantino gets called up before Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, John Cena, Dave Batista, Shelton Benjamin, all those dudes. Rob Conway, who was actually like the top face of the place.
Yeah.
All of them did not get the call, but Ricco did. Right?
Do you think that that's just like American Gladiators crossover? So like,
I don't think that.
like,
I do not think that. And I told Batista what I thought. He reached out and he said, I have an offer to go to Japan and work, I presume, in New Japan. And I don't know what they're doing because they just called up. He was always very respectful of everybody, but he was like, Ricco is a good dude and he's good in the ring, but he's older than everybody. And I'm not a young pup myself, and I don't know what to do. So we get on the phone, and I remember that he had a cold at the time because I was like, let's get lunch. And he was like, I got a cold. My voice sounds weird. And I was like, you sound like Leviathan to me, man. You sound like you came up out of the river.
yeah, he probably got that cold in the river.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Good callback. And he was like, what do you think I should do? And I was like, well, buddy, I just watch a lot of wrestling, and I know a lot about wrestling. But he didn't do either of those two things. He wasn't like a wrestling aficionado, if you will.
Because he was like a bouncer or something.
Yeah, and just like a strong man.
Yeah, just a hoss.
Yeah. You can read his book, I guess. I never have. I don't know if I'm in it. I might be, because I ended up being kind of pivotal. Because I said, don't leave. They're putting a lot of trouble into you guys to keep you here. And I told him the old parable about the Ultimate Warrior holding up Vince McMahon for $1 million or $500,000 to do a job at a pay-per-view. It was like, I think, SummerSlam.
Yeah.
Right? And Ultimate Warrior was like, give me the money and unmarked bills, deliver it to the hotel, or I do not appear tonight on the pay-per-view. And he doesn't want that again, especially with like a guy like you, like that didn't mean that in any kind of negative connotation, but it's like, this is how this is how I imagine, my conjecture is, they're going to call up the last guy that you think should be called up just to see what you do. So if you jump off the boat, or if you bitch about it, or if you whatever, then he knows that he doesn't want to work with you because he doesn't want to bother,
It's probably some very keen insight, I'm going to be honest.
Thanks. And Batista got called up about a month later.
Wow.
Right? He got called up. And I still didn't go to OVW. I didn't go meet him. I didn't talk to him. I didn't call him on the phone again and say, let's get lunch now that you feel better. I didn't do any of those things. I just kept dicking around, going to my job at Holly Cook, you know, looking at the internet, reading comic books, you know, doing drugs, having sex with my girlfriend. I don't know what I was doing.
20. You were in your 20s,
I was
man.
in my 20s.
No 20-year-old knows what they're doing. Nobody in their 20s
Right.
knows what they're doing.
You know, so I never tried to do anything to try to make anything into anything, right? Because I kind of like had it in my head that like trying was dumb. Like trying is lame. Like it's not cool to try, you know? I don't know. So,
Spoken like a true 20-something.
I was going to
Right?
say, wait, it's cool to try.
yeah.
When did that happen?
Well, you're doing this. Come on. You know,
Well,
you're doing something.
to be honest, I've been having a lot of conversations with myself recently, and one of the big ones always comes back to, bro, you got to stop acting like you're in your 20s. Like you are removed from your 20s now. That you need to leave that mentality behind. And a lot of the things that you're saying, I'm like, yeah, bro, that is how I felt a lot of times.
I am kind of two minds about that, right? One thing is, I believe, like, I'm a grown man who does not have kids, who collects toys and comic books and stuff like that. So it's like, what makes me not a child is the way that I interact with the world around me and the way that I handle business and conduct myself socially. And maturity is very important to me in those senses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that wolf inside of me. And the other one is life is inherently meaningless. We're on a planet that should not, by any standards, have life on it because none of the other ones seem to.
Right.
Like, nothing means anything. Do literally whatever you feel like doing. And I kind of like ping pong back and forth between those two worldviews in perpetuity. You know?
Well, you can't believe one all the time because you really will drive yourself insane.
That's true. Well, I mean, the key to life is balance, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, Batista he's getting called up. He's going to go to the show, the big time, SmackDown, Raw, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they have this big show that's at Kentucky Kingdom, and Undertaker is there, and Kane is there, and Big Show, I think, is there too, because Big Show had put on too much weight, and they sent him to OVW to lose it,
Right.
and to like get better, because at WCW they kind of just like brought the bull into the china shop and let him do his thing, because WCW wasn't run very well, and he was careless in the ring and stuff. He was going to hurt somebody, and they were like, no, you got to get trained.
Yeah.
And another case of like, let's see what you do when we make you go to a place that you probably don't think you want to stay in for very long,
Right.
and, you know, learn how to be a wrestler. So this stacked show, and of course a lot of OVW talent too. And Batista calls me up and is like, come with me, man. Come with me. Meet everybody. Just hang out. Like, just see what it's about with me, man. Because I could use a friend, and it would be nice if you were there with me, and it would be a good time. We'd have a good time. Week before that, I had gone to Barnes & Noble. My friend had gotten that job as the music manager, and the store manager didn't want to sit down and talk to me, but we made it happen. Sort of like as a olive branch to the guy that was coming in. And he was like, what makes you think that you should come back here after how things went last time? And I was like, because I believe in the power of music. And the way that I meant this shit. When people come in and they're looking for something, I'm the guy that can put it in their hand. And that means a lot to me. And what it should mean to you is that means that I can sell. And that means that I can help make that department viable, even in these days of Napster at the time. And it's something that I think if you just give me a chance, I'll show you that I can do it. And it was like a lot of hemming and hawing, and the dude didn't want to hire me, but he did. And the day of the show, the Saturday night of the show, was my first Saturday night, and I was on the schedule. And I didn't even want to go and be like,
Yo.
can I trade with somebody? Like, none of that, because I was like, so very serious about this job at Barnes Noble. But this was like such a big thing. This, because Undertaker, Kane, this is no longer just like some independent wrestling up the street. These are like, you know, guys I saw as a kid.
Right.
Taker, at least. And I had to be like, man, I'm sorry, I can't. And he's like, oh, it's cool. So it's like, to him, it probably was like, he's just not interested. He could get out of that if he wanted to. It's hard to fathom that he couldn't have seen it that way.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't go. That ended up being like Batista's last OVW show, right? And then he was up and away. And I was still reviewing the shows. And I would still talk to Batista here and there. And he would tell me stuff. Like, he and Test weren't getting along. And then they started to become buds. And like, when Batista first came in, nobody remembers this. They called him the Deacon Batista. And they told him to buy a suit. And so he went and had like his first ever custom suit made. Very expensive.
I think I know this story.
And then he shows up and they cut the sleeves off of it because they had him teamed up with
Devon Dudley.
Devon Dudley. Yeah, you know this. Devon Dudley was like the Reverend, and Batista was like his like minion, whatever, right?
Deacon Batista.
Right. And I'm telling him, like, look, man, they're just testing you to see if you will do what they tell you to do. Sometimes if you do that, you'll get rewarded. And sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll end up being a jobber guy that they fire after a while. Or maybe
Wear a turkey suit or something.
Right. Or maybe you'll become one of the top wrestlers ever in the echelon.
Of
How
the
do
whole
you say that
thing.
word?
Echelon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
I'm a autodidact. I mainly read words, you know, so I don't always know how to say them. Yeah. And like little by little, I would hear from him less and less because he didn't have time for me, you know. But I never met him in person. We only had conversations on the phone or email.
Mm-hmm.
And then little by little, he just kind of slipped away. And I was working at the Barnes & Noble. I ended up working there for 11 years. I ended up running the music department. They let me go the same time they let all the music managers go all around the country because they didn't see it as a viable thing. Meanwhile, my department was the only profitable department in the store that I worked at the time because I was running it with passion and flair. Now, all of Barnes & Noble is run like that. In recent years, if you go and look, like the stores are run like independent stores only.
I haven't been in Barnes & Noble in forever, man.
It's kind of cool. It kind of like it hurts my heart a little bit that I'm not there, but also I don't want to be there. Like at this stage of life, it doesn't make sense for me to have done that this whole time. But while I was working there, like I said before, the wrestlers that lived in those complexes behind there would come in sometimes, like to get a cup of coffee and come over, and I would like see somebody that I had trashed and just be like, oh, shit. I hope he doesn't find out who I am, you know, like it was like that kind of thing. And then I don't remember how long after that I did it. It's really hard to say. Could have been a matter of months or years, but 1 week they didn't run my review that I wrote, and I took it personally, as young people tend to do. And I was just like, you know what, screw you guys. I don't need you for anything. What I could have done was reached out to Uncle Dave.
Yeah.
I'm sure he could have used me.
Yeah.
Did not occur to me to do that, and I just didn't do it. And then years went by. My interest in wrestling kind of ebbed and flowed. OVW was there the whole time. The first time I ever went to OVW was maybe in like 2014, somewhere around the time that Al Snow first took over, and he had a thing that was like Wrestling a Go-Go, where he was trying to do like burlesque and wrestling together, which is kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah,
like,
I can deal with that.
and actual practice didn't work out very well, and like the main memory that I had was that Al was in the audience, like sitting behind me, and he was by far the most famous and charismatic person in the room. So everybody was very aware of what he was doing. Funny, I just looked over and saw his action figure too.
There he is. He's always watching.
And like whenever the show would like slow down or like nothing was happening, which happened frequently, he would like make a big theatric thing of getting up and like running back and like yelling at somebody. and coming back out like, sorry, folks, you know, like the show's not going like it's supposed to. And it wasn't good, to be honest with you. But I do remember that I popped him. There was I was doing a lot of heckling during the show. And there was a guy who came out who was like French. And I think he had like a little poodle or something. And like, he like was automatically the heel because of like how he talked. And I yelled out, I don't like you because you're different from me. I don't like foreigners. And Al laughed really hard when I said that, which again, I could have, after the show, been like, you need a writer? You know, like all these things that I could have been doing if I just weren't so myopic about, you know, working at a store or whatever the hell, you know. So it wasn't, I went to a couple of Impact things that were there at Davis Arena, but it wasn't until the Netflix show where I was like, I can go to this.
Yeah.
Like, I can just go to that. I could almost walk there. Like, I live so close. And the reason that's kind of like, to sort of tie this all up in a bow, the thing that I thought about last night as relates to this, today is January 22nd. We're recording this?
24th.
4th, okay. I feel like it's the 10th week of January. This month has just
Golly,
been
man, it's been awful.
unbelievably long. But I gather that Haley J is going to be gone for a while. She's pursuing something else. I don't know what. I don't know, even know that's true. But, you know, you saw the match. It felt like it kind of was so long, you know.
One of her, I mean, she was on fire.
She really was.
She left it all out there.
I know.
For sure.
And like she even said, like, I'll be back again. Like that's what I can report that she said. It was an earshot where I was sitting. You know, the girls in front of me all love her. You know.
That
so,
you're in your section there.
Yeah, Brianna, of course, who's
a
great fan of Haley J, and you know the two. Gracie, you know, Wes's daughter, who's in the, you know, both of them are in the documentary. And like, you know, she's hugging him, and there's a picture of her with like her eyes closed where she's hugging him, and it's like, you know, that's a person whose life has a lot of trepidation and has had to overcome a lot of things, and this is such a pure thing to even be able to stand close to it. It's almost like you feel like you shouldn't look directly at it. Like it's like this is like almost like a private moment, but it's like it's right here. And you feel like that'll influence the way that these kids grow up. Like all the kids that go to OVW, I feel like that's such a central thing in their lives.
Yeah.
You know? And like other kids and like adults who kind of like haven't forgotten how to play, you know, and are still like having fun in a certain way. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And so I say again, if you have the opportunity to go to OVW and you haven't done it, for whatever reason, whatever block is in your head, you know, whatever it is that's making you feel like it's not for you or whatever, go to OVW. Go. I could have been there all this time. Like all this time, it could have been a force in my life.
It's insane that you had such like an intimate relationship with it too, and never went.
Never went. And I feel so stupid. Like I feel like what I feel like now talking about this is like when, I don't know how it was when you guys were in grade school, but I grew up in the 80s, and every so often they would like bring like a drug addict in to talk to us.
I remember that. Yeah.
That was basically extinguished by the time I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a real thing. They would bring like they would bring people in whose lives had gone way off track, and they would like be like, and obviously I'm not quite, you know, that serious, but like, go. Like there's opportunities there for you too. You know what I mean? Like you can say something and make a sign, it'll become part of the show.
And it's such a family there.
Yeah.
Amongst the people that are regulars, and when they recognize someone as kind of a non-regular or a first-timer or someone that is becoming a regular, they will open their hands or open their arms up equally to everyone. Like there are so few places in this day and age, especially in 2025, that are truly like in unison.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's funny because of the things that we'll call a community now, you know, like I'm a member of several online communities, you know, of like comic book people or whatever. I don't think it qualifies.
No.
You're still just looking at your phone or your laptop or whatever. Like being able to have a place that you can go to and experience that warmth, you know, and see somebody. It's something that we, you know, is not far from the primordial ooze people started figuring out. As soon as there were people, we're all in this cave or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's so many ways. And I mean, you know, you look at like the pilgrims or whatever, just like people who identified together as a community and, you know, going to a place and doing a thing together, whether you're bowling or you're playing poker or whatever else, you know?
Those were probably the two things that struck me most about the first time we went to OVW. The first one being, I mean, we were getting ready to do this thing, going to see it live in person, didn't know you very well.
No.
Had known Tiny Brian for several years, but didn't really know each other as well as we do now, and will even more in the future. But halfway through the show, realizing you're part of the show because you can go home and watch yourself and how you interact with people in the crowd and react to matches and stuff like that.
Yeah, start chants, you know?
Yeah, that added another level of it to me. But the second larger thing was how the people accepted us. Like the first time we went after we started the podcast and released our first couple episodes, we hadn't been there in probably a month, 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. And then we went back, and all the OVW folks knew who we were.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
By sight, and came up and introduced themselves. And it was really just like a surreal experience because we're watching your show and we're, you know, talking about your show, and that's our show.
your work that we are trying to highlight. Like, we are nobody in this process.
Yeah, exactly. And then, who was the first one? It
Cornish.
was either, it was probably Eric Cornish.
Cornish,
He's a good guy, by the way.
Yeah, he's very good at that
Yeah.
too. Like he's very engaging with people.
Yeah. And then Josh Ashcraft, I think, was probably a close
That's
second.
interesting. I've had almost no interaction with him.
Really?
Yeah. I think last night was kind of the first, actually, because Miranda was like asking him, like, how do we get our residuals for coming up with Leather Daddy Doug? And he's like, I don't know, I don't like him. You know, he was maintaining kayfabe.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, he didn't break for nobody.
Josh is the first time I met Al and got any relation to OVW. Josh came on my radio show here in Lexington.
Nice.
And so Josh and I have always, he's a big Misfits guy. I'm a Misfits
All
guy.
right.
Yeah. So
that tracks.
so we always had that, horror movies. So anytime I got to kind of catch up with him, you know, we knew each other, but enough to say hello to each other.
When you have that shorthand of things that you're interested in. I always think about, there was one of many documentaries about the 60s. And I think it was Graham Nash who was talking about how at that time, if you saw another dude with long hair, it was like, that dude likes good music. He's interested in things that I'm interested in. He's got the same political views as me. He probably has a similar familial background. He probably has the same type of job as me. Like, all of this stuff would just be like instant tribal recognition of like, that's another person who's like who I am. You know, so it's like that with us too, man. You know, like it's like, you know, the things that we feel so passionately about. There's a lot of people who go their whole life. This is something I learned working at Barnes & Noble. You kind of, when you start working at a music store, you kind of come in like Jack Black in
High Fidelity. Yeah.
And then if you are lucky, you don't stay Jack Black. You become John Cusack over a period of time. Now, John Cusack is miserable in that movie. And the big quote that I love is, was I miserable because I listened to pop music, or did I listen to pop music because I was miserable?
Yeah.
But that whole thing of just like, I don't like that music, and you're wrong, and you're stupid, like, you shake that because you meet people who, you know, you occasionally will have people come in who like, I don't like Alan Jackson. You know what I mean? Like, in a way, Alan Jackson would be like beneath contempt to me, in a way. Like, it's like, I don't care about that's like fake country music. I don't care. I'm not interested. But like, I remember there was a guy who was going through a divorce, and it was heartrending, and his kids, and all this was going on, and it was Alan Jackson's music that spoke to him. So I happily like ordered all the Alan Jackson forum that we could get, and like outside of that, it's just a guy who listens to the radio, watches whatever is on TV. Doesn't really have interest.
That was his rock.
Yeah,
during that experience.
So, like, for people that can feel passionately about these things, it's like we can see colors that some people can't see, And it's not for us to be dicks about it, It's for us to celebrate it together and hope that if somebody kind of comes into the fold, that you can help them feel like they're part of the show too,
Fun fact before we get out of here. The first time I saw High Fidelity was when I was 11. And that next morning, maybe that night, my mom's and dad's record collection were in alphabetical order by year. the way that he has his organized in his collection.
I have very little organization. Mine is like by like personal preference.
Maybe
that's organization. That's still
what
organization.
I'll end up doing this weekend is watching High Fidelity and organizing my record collection, and then pull something to bring down here for us to do a top 5 or something.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Rocko, thanks for coming by today, man. Rocko Jerome, ghostagents.net. Where else can we find you? What else can we find you?
That's the main thing, man. I'm selling comic books.
Hot Point Davis Arena. We can find you there.
I'm there. You can
He's the guy with the Leather Daddy Doug
he
sign.
He didn't go,
Sometimes.
and now he goes, and you should too.
Yeah, I go as often as I can, basically.
So do we, which hasn't been much recently, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
Right on.
Rocko, thanks, man.
Go to OVW.
Go to OVW, OVWTIX.com.
If you haven't gone, go.